The Dr. Oba Tashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow. A show for all who are on the journey to discover the truths about their identity, history, culture, politics, spirituality, and family relationships. This is a show for the Black Freedom Movement and the Black Power generation and the hip-hop generation, including Black Lives Matter and associate activists, all of whom are seeking change. Dr. Oba Tashaka and his guests are dropping knowledge and insight from his successful organizing, research, writings, and innovative thoughts, the best of which have piped into God's mind to lift you up higher and higher. To the bosses, OGs, rappers, influencers, and those looking to evolve from the constraints of misinformation and miseducation to build a foundation for personal growth, love, and mental freedom. Check out the wisdom of the OR. Yeah, that's the original revolutionary, Oba T, who inspired 1 million black men with his rousing speech at the Million Man March, and who continues to fight, write, and speak the truth. Dr. Oba Tashaka is one of the deepest deep thinkers in the world today. A quote by Dr. Asa Hilliard. Dr. Oba Tashaka, then Bill Bradley, was the best leader organizer in the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE. An endorsement from Dr. George Wiley, Associate Director of National CORE and the best organizer blacks produced in the 1970s as the organizer of the National Welfare Rights Organization. The Dr. Oba Tashaka Show. Free your mind, and the rest will follow.
Greetings. How's everybody doing? Greetings to the family. We've got something cooked up for you today. I hope you get something out of this. As usual, for people who are new, hit the red button that makes you a subscriber. You get counted on the show. And if you like the show, hit the like button. Welcome to Gloria Briscoe. Greetings, Brother Ogawa, Sister Robin. See if anybody else is here. Peggy Parks Miller. Greetings. And to the others as they come on. I want to thank people for making their donations. Next week, I'll announce them and thank you personally. James Pooh, greetings. I especially want to thank my buddy and good friend, Professor James Smalls. We've been doing a lot of work together over the years, and he's let me have access to his Facebook page of 30,000 viewers for a couple of months. He said he wouldn't do that for anybody else, so I'm appreciative. Thank you, brother, because we need to get this message out to more people. So I'm really appreciative of that. And Smalls is beautiful brother. For the last 4 weeks, and this is now the 5th, I've gone into a number of topics tied to this MAGA takeover. And these have been done for a reason, to provide a background so people could have a better understanding of what's going on. But it has been done primarily to provide the basis for any kind of work that Black folks are going to do in terms of rebuilding our families and communities, and that Africans around the world can do because what is affecting this country is affecting the world. And so the shows started with the techno-industrial investor class, a play off of Biden's closing remarks. And that was in many ways prescient. It was something that he knew of for a while, but didn't share because that class also supported the Democrats, but a sizable section of them had shifted to Trump. And so he was pulling the cover off. And so the first one was to look at driving forces behind this government takeover. And what is this really about? And you've seen Elon Musk all over the place. Then the second show was on Jimmy Carter and the way in which he introduced neoliberalism, which isn't normally known. Most people trace that to Reagan, which is showing you that it's a Democratic and Republican enterprise. And why is that important? Because that's basically what this takeover is about. It's operating on the ideas of privatization, government's too big, let's put everything in the pockets. They want you to think of local communities. Well, let's see how much is left for local communities. This is really putting it in the pocket of the rich. It's collapsing the New Deal or the welfare state, which is okay when it's a welfare state for the rich, but not when it's for Blacks, workers, poor people. And we fit in all those categories too. So that was the reason for that show. And it was focusing in the case of Carter and neoliberalism on his role. Before that, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and showing how that was used as a cover for what they're doing now, because you can get away with murder if you can say, you're going after Blacks because, you know, they're part of the problem. Even whites who aren't too smart have figured out their elite are the problem as well. And they are cheering for what Trump is doing now because they think that he's clearing it out for the elite, clearing out big government. But look at who's leading the charge. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world. So you think he is going to provide for the poor? Let me just note a little clip from Leon. By the way, this was put forward by Trump to counter Time magazine putting Elon Musk behind the Resolute or the president's desk.
The Pentagon, for instance, which the president I know has directed you to look into.
Yeah.
Are you policing yourself in that? Is there any sort of accountability check and balance in place that would provide any transparency for the American people?
Well, all of our actions are fully public.
Mr. Musk, you said on X that an example of the fraud that you have cited was $50 million of condoms was sent to Gaza. But after fact check this, apparently Gaza in Mozambique, and the program was to protect them against HIV. So can you correct the statements? It wasn't sent to Hamas, actually. It was sent to Mozambique, which makes sense why condoms was sent there.
Yeah.
And how can we make sure that all the statements that you said were correct, so we can trust what you say?
Well, first of all, some of the things that I say will be incorrect and should be corrected. So nobody's going to bat 1,000. I mean, we will make mistakes, but we'll act quickly to correct any mistakes. If I'm not sure we should be sending $50 million worth of condoms to anywhere, frankly.
Oh, I see. It was 50 million sent. Now he's saying, I'm not sure it was sent anywhere. And so the richest man in the world is being given free rein by Trump to do the damage, because Trump will do something and not think about what will happen later. We discussed this the last time. So even though normally a picture of anybody behind the president's desk would get them fired, that got his brain fired. The man who had organized his presidential campaign before, he got fired just by having his face on Time magazine. And he had to go. But Trump was making it clear there, he's not getting rid of the richest man in the world. After all, he's going to make him richer. He doesn't care what happens to anybody else. So this is the leader of the techno, industrial, and investor, and space, and a whole lot of other classes. And he's made his money off of government welfare. Government, money, billions and billions of dollars. And so he's saying everything's open. Oh, really? There isn't even any analysis for the hundreds of thousands of jobs that they claim they're going to clean out. So this was part of the reason for covering those topics. And then blacks and neoliberalism, Elon Musk and the MAGA Trump takeover of the federal government done last week. So those are providing a background to understand what's really going on as opposed to the hype and the fear that they're trying to send out. This show, what I want to do is accomplish two things with this show. One, I want to show how the neoliberal project that's operating at the federal level has been working for a very long time at the community level. And some of us are not aware of the degree to which neoliberalism has infected itself into broad areas of Black life. It's basically been a hammer against the Black family. And I've dealt with this before, where I've gone into how the Black family has eroded more between 1968 and now than between our coming to this country in 1968, let alone 1865. And we maintained two-parent households for 100 years, but with the impact of deindustrialization, privatizing everything, taking resources out of the community that could be helpful for us and out of the other communities as well, this has really collapsed the two-parent household from 75% two-parent households up until 1968 to about 37% two-parent households today. And that's among the working class, 61% two-parent households among the middle class, the Black middle class. But the Black middle class is suffering from double-digit unemployment rates and high death rates and high infant mortality rates, just as the masses of Black people are. And education has not got them out of the system of oppression. You're not going to be able to do it through the talented 10th formula of W.B. Du Bois, which he concluded eventually wouldn't work. He also concluded that while he thought a talented 10th educated Blacks could lead other Blacks, he reached a conclusion later that most of them didn't even care about the masses of Black people. They cared about themselves. So that's one of the objectives of this show, is to show how the neoliberal project has affected Black communities, and in next week's show, white communities, because I've got some breakthrough stuff on what's really underneath this, and we'll deal with that next week. And the second objective of this show is to show that basically this takeover of the federal government is a manifestation of a choice between two cultures. And this is an analysis you've heard from me before, for people who have watched the show before, and these words come from God, a choice between two cultures. And so what will be breakthrough next week will be to show how there's a choice between two cultures going on in white communities, leading to different outcomes than those going to Black communities when it comes to political outcomes. You know, a racist and reactionary set of outcomes occurring in white communities, but the breakdown that the forces that have hit Black communities since 1968 is occurring now in white communities, and it's leading to similar results. And it's part of the reason why Trump is in the White House. And so this is something that will be breakthrough in terms of the analysis on what's really behind what's going on in white communities. Because even the authors of neoliberalism, the evangelical Christians, and the neoliberal economists who have joined together, they did not know that the forces they would put into effect would lead to this, a choice between two cultures, because they think unilaterally, you know, one way, a rational single line of thought. And so the biggest hit that this neoliberalism has made on Black communities has been on the Black family. And I've gone through this before, so I'm not going through this again today, except what I want to do is stress the point that under neoliberalism, basically the services that were previously provided under New Deal legislation, Roosevelt legislation, that provided affordable housing, supplements for poverty, including rent supplements, a backup for public education, because during my time when I went to school, that is university, I paid $150 for a year of education. And that was true in New York. That was true in California and a number of other places. So what's happened with neoliberalism is all of the support systems have been pulled out, put in the pockets of the rich, and the family is supposed to assume the responsibility. And so there's a consensus of Democratic and Republican elites that have agreed under neoliberalism, starting with Carter, to shift the responsibility for taking care of the needs of families away from any kind of support that is provided by the government totally onto families. And it's hit Black families the hardest. And so with deregulation and tax cuts, particularly the big ones that Trump brought in, but Bush did it, but not at that level. With all of these shifts in terms of money going into the pockets of the rich as opposed to the poor, you've had a shift in values. And this has been a part of what the neoliberal advocates, starting with the evangelical white Christians, have pushed, and they have centered their arguments around two-parent households and the sanctity of two-parent households, while not mentioning the fact that they have greatly eroded white two-parent households and created part of the crisis that has led to Trump, but they have really done great damage to Black two-parent households. And so the whole emphasis has gone there. And essentially what the neoliberal policies coming out of evangelical Christians and neoliberal economists has been to put down the single parent household, to put down single parents. And in such a way that if you understood how it worked in the rest of the world, you would understand that between 26 and 29 of the richest Western democracies, the family is not put in a position of bearing the burden of taking care of all of the needs of its children. The cost of higher education, as well as the taxes that go into public schools, and the cost of everything else, medical care, and anything else that the family needs. So this is the standout in the world, a savage standout. And Black women, single parent households headed by Black women, have been the target. And so government policies have been shaped for two-parent households, but not for single parents, knowing that they have ripped apart the fabric of two-parent households. So I'm not going into the attack on the Black family in detail. I've done that before, but I wanted to note that as an opening to this, that sisters have been put in the real bind, and that the weight has been put all on them when marriages are collapsing, and very often they've found themselves left with the task of parenting on their own, and sometimes with the help of brothers. And sometimes, of course, now with the erosion of two-parent households, new arrangements, because we know Black folks and other people in this society have made new housing arrangements or living arrangements that they'll call long-term, and that's because with these forces that have hit Black families, there's been a shift in family values. And so many have come to question the viability of family because it's unaffordable. There's other reasons, but that's the main reason. No finance, no romance. Or if there's romance, it's going to be short, because it's not going to have any backup. We'll see how this has hit white communities next week. So this show is focusing on a choice between two cultures, the underlying cause behind the state of Black and MAGA communities today. Today, I'm focusing on Black communities largely. So this choice between two cultures hits quite well with the beautiful performance done by Kendrick Lamar at the Super Bowl game, a halftime performance. By the way, for those of you that don't know it, those performers are paid nothing. These owners of professional football get rich, and they got their nerve having the best Black entertainers going, performing, and a lot of others. And they got so much money, they can't stick it in their pocket. It's hard to even count it in the bank. But they got to come on and, do their own thing. And they do it because of this huge audience. And for those of you that don't know it, Brother Lamar used this to launch his business. And so, and it was a very tightly organized thing. So I want to fit in what he did with this theme of a choice between two cultures, and particularly to show that at the core of what we're dealing with as a people and what he was addressing as a rapper is a choice between two cultures, one of which is a Greek-created, European, materialistic system based on hierarchy where there are people on the top and those people run everything for people on the bottom, where spirit has been taken out of every domain of life, including religion. This is a culture, this Aryan culture, this European culture, is a culture of rationality, of reason minus intuition. And so now we are seeing the machine mind in AI, artificial intelligence. And for those who worship this culture, this is supposed to be the highest manifestation, that a machine can do everything for you, you know? And it's a consequence of this long love affair that the Aryan has had with rationality, stripped of reason, of intuition, stripped of feeling, stripped of compassion. And again, Plato's the author of that. So quit saying that he got everything from Kemet. He hatched a project that has become a global project, the Aryan project. And that's what my book on Seba and Sodiah is covering, to the point that education can't even teach to the whole person, making the miseducated the most brainwashed among all people because they've had more time to tamper with their minds. And since that's all they tamper with, their bodies and their spirits are left out. But what's put into that materialistic, individualistic, vulturistic mindset is something that has brought ugliness, oppression, global warming, and a whole lot of other things to the world and to this country. So as I compare Brother Lamar's presentation and then go into this one, I want to note that he's reacting to this in his way, in a beautiful way. And so this toxic culture, which is based on toxic masculinity and is structured into capitalism, a system created through slavery. So anyone that says that capitalism is a great system, you're identifying with people who have squeezed every ounce of wealth out of our blood, out of our sweat, through enslavement, and out of the lives of Native Americans, and out of squeezing and taking the land of Mexicans who are now called aliens and are being shipped out of the country, some of which were foolish enough in terms of Latinos, 54% of Latino men to vote for Trump. And you're now seeing some of them getting shipped out of the country along with their wives, or sometimes they're staying, but their wives are gone. And the wives had real trouble with what they were doing, most of them, based on the data, you know. So what we're seeing is this choice between two cultures is between two philosophies, two worldviews, two cultures, two ideas of politics, ideas of family, of social structure, of art, of everything. And so opposed to this is African and African American culture. These shows have been focused on this in great depth. And, you know, the African-centered project is focused on this. And so this African African American culture, because African American culture is founded on the precepts and principles of African culture adapted to America with negative influences that we have to discard, but brilliant innovations in the culture, making it the popular and classical culture of this country and of the world, and a complex culture of great beauty. And so this culture is opposed to this Aryan materialistic culture because it's grounded and rooted in the mighty spirit. And the institutions of our community are founded on that, starting with the family. And so spirit is at the heart of this. And because spirit is at the heart of it, it makes this a beautiful culture. Or as any of our cultural workers say, going back to enslavement, their task as artists is to bring beauty out of ugliness. And that applies to all domains. That's what George Washington Carver said. That's what King was doing with his contribution, his integrity, and his sacrifice. So spirit is key. This is a creative culture, whereas the one we're opposed to is a mechanical culture. Can't even dance good. I saw something on the Ignornet where whites are complaining, MAGA whites and others, that they weren't included in the program. Now they're trying to exclude us from every part of history. They can't, but at least the books that present it, trying to ban us from employment and everything else with their DEI, but they're complaining because they didn't get a chance to dance. So one of the brothers' responses was, since, we are talking about a system based on merit, a meritocracy, which we know it isn't, we just picked the best qualified. You weren't. And it wasn't just to dance, you know what I mean? To bring forth beauty, period. Not to say that there aren't some whites that can and do, but sorry, you're not qualified for this. So humanism is at the core of this African and African American culture. And I spent shows on this showing you how the world's first civilization coming from the Coon, Twa people, gave birth to a system with no slavery. They couldn't even think of capitalism or private property. So it's this culture that's also based on a male-female system where you can't have one without the other. And some of us have been infected by patriarchy, but we have survived because of the cooperation between males and females. And even with the heavy hit that Black families have taken, you can believe that we'll come through this, just as we came through enslavement, where they broke up families and extended family communities kept us together. And they separated sometimes mother, father, sister, and brother. But what we got from the larger extended family community was love. And this is underestimated in the narrative of enslavement. Most Africans were not starved of love. And the only place we got it was with each other. And so the choice between two cultures is between a culture of love and beauty and one of hate, because this Eurocentric culture is grounded in racism and an inferiority complex, because that's what racism is based on. Those who are defining others as inferior, they're making a statement about what they feel about themselves, because that's how psychology works. You know what I mean? Be careful what comes out of your mouth, You may be talking about somebody else, but you're talking about yourself. And it can be positive or negative. So these are all key elements. And then key to this culture is freedom. And I've gone into before our notions of freedom compared to theirs. Theirs is when you have power to do anything you want. That's their notion of freedom. That's what they're doing with the federal government right now. Whatever they want, you know. With us, freedom comes with discipline. Freedom comes with responsibility. That show that Kendrick Lamar put on, that was a carefully planned operation, down to the minute. He had to have those props up and down within no time. And he had everybody fitting in a certain way, yet it was beautiful. You know what I mean? It was planned, but there was a lot of feeling in it, a lot of creativity in it. And of course, democracy is key to this culture. There have never really been any democracies in the Aryan world. Their claim for it in Greece is false. That was not a democracy. That was a group of people in Athens picked under Solon's reform to then pick a candidate, you know, to hold office. That candidate had to be a rich person. That was not real democracy. That wasn't everybody having a say-so. And so even now, what they're saying is Trump is dismantling democracy. No, he's dismantling Republican government. That's what he's trying to do. And so far, he's been quite successful. That's what his project is. But our project is one where everybody has a say-so. And so these are two cultures, two worldviews. They're clashing. And so when we look at Brother Lamar and Samuel Jackson, a masterful actor, by the way. Samuel Jackson, you know, favorite organization was the Black Panther Party. So don't confuse him with the roles he plays. He'll play any kind of role because he just loves acting. You know what I mean? But he's a master at what he does. And Brother Lamar, he had many puns in this. Here it is, Samuel Jackson portraying Uncle Sam, you know, who's as white can get, huh? But his name is Sam. Ain't that funny? That's pun number one. You know what I mean? So, we got Kendrick Lamar, a talented brother. It's unfortunate that I can't show this in real time, but they took us off the air for doing that the last time. You know, the rule is on the internet is you can use music even though it's not yours as long as it's not monetized. And so I've been doing this for a while, but for some reason I wondered why they decided to pull this. So what you see with Lamar, Kendrick Lamar, a Pulitzer Prize winner. Multiple Grammy Award winner. Took away more awards in this last Grammy show than anybody else. He opens up with, "My name is Kendrick Lamar." And then he goes on to do a pun off of "The revolution won't be televised" and says, "The revolution will be televised." And he makes a subtle comment about, well, you may not like it, but the message is coming from me. And then you got Samuel Jackson doing the role. Doing the role of Uncle Sam. And he's really symbolic of this Aryan culture. And so Kendrick Lamar is rapping and talking about 40 acres and a mule, and makes the point that that's the music business. But you've got Samuel Jackson playing the role of Uncle Sam, talking about being cool. Don't blow it. Whites are digging this. And then be rational, you know what I mean? Which he's referring to this Aryan worldview, you know? While Kendrick Lamar is doing his little dance, real cool, you know? And then as he goes into a very important statement, they not like us. Here comes Serena Williams doing her Crip walk. Serena said that was the best 3 minutes of her life. She ain't never had so much enjoyment as that. Of course, they were doing a little cripping and rapping on Drake, but it was bigger. She was walking over this dead, mechanistic, materialistic European culture. And man, that was quite a walk that she had there. That was quite a dance. In fact, she said it was much better than what she did when she was playing basketball. You know what I mean? So what we have here is Kendrick Lamar also talking about a cultural divide. We're here talking about a choice between two cultures. And Donald Trump is standing up in the stand. You never saw him being portrayed on the screen. You know what I mean? And Trump didn't know what he was watching. A whole lot of people didn't know what they were watching. They had to absorb this later, but others did. And so they were tapping on his mess and the mess of this vulturistic system. Lamar raps out, try to rig the game, but you can't fake influence. Meaning, wherever we go, he's talking about the rap game and 40 acres and a mule, and he talks about how that's what the rap business is about, getting their 40 acres and a mule that we never received. But he's also speaking about the 40 acres blacks never got, the rewards we never got for what built this country. And so when he's saying, try to rig the game, but you can't fake influence, meaning no matter how many rules you set up there, how many efforts you make to cut us out of this or cut us out of that, well, guess what? We're going to beat you, you know, because you can't fake influence. Influence means doing your thing, tap dancing on the heads of your enemies. So again, they not like us, meaning we got something beautiful behind us. And so this show, which was beauty personified, is at the heart of what all of this is about. So a choice between two cultures. Now, Samuel Jackson is playing the role of Uncle Sam. You understand? And while this show is going to focus heavily on the way in which a choice between two cultures has come to work through neoliberalism and its impact on the politics and particularly the religious institutions in the Black community. Neoliberalism is just one phase of capitalism, and it's capitalism that's at the source of the problem. And so when Samuel Jackson is playing the role of Uncle Sam, the pun is that's the problem. You know, what Uncle Sam represents: wars, attacks on the rich, attacks on the poor, and enriching the rich. And so I thought it was fitting to open this with something that I showed a long time ago, and it's a poem by a poet in the Bay Area who's passed on. His name is Lodge Daly, and his poem is about America. And the poem is entitled America the Pimp, because these two clashes of culture that's leading people to sometimes make subliminal choices, unconscious choices, it's rooted in this racist and capitalist system.
Beyond post-traumatic slave syndrome, the post-1968 hostile external forces. We have here a master poet, Brother Robert Woods, and he is going to be delivering a poem that sets the tone for this first day. Is going to put the real framework into this through a poem that was written by a beautiful brother named Lodge Daly, Dr. Lodge Daly, who had served time in prison as in Soledad, came out, had a poetry group called the Soledad Prison Poets, and went on to college and got him a PhD in psychology. He was also a writer, and particularly on male-female relationships. You could call him Dr. Love. In fact, I consulted him sometime when I needed help in my relationships. And he married a sister named Odella. And he would always call me. Every now and then he called me. Now, Robert Woods was closer to him than I was, but he was my buddy. He'd call me, and he'd tell me this more than once. He said, "Brother Tashaka, you know, Odella picked me over." It was, I won't name his name, but it was a leading Black psychologist. And I said, "Yeah, you told me that before." This was his greatest achievement in life, that this Black woman had picked him over someone who was more prominent at the time. And so this was a brother of love, but this was also a conscious brother. He was in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So he came up with a poem that Brother Robert Woods, who is a master poet himself, who is a poet's poet, has got the voice of a poet. A lot of poets would die for Robert Woods' voice, let alone for his abilities as a writer and as a poet. So it's my honor to have Brother Robert Woods present a poem that will even make what Smedley Butler say, not be quite enough.
All right. Well, that's a glorious introduction. America the Pimp. There are many different things that the eyes can see, but there are very few truths upon which everyone can agree. The fact that we live in a capitalistic nation puts everyone here in the same situation. For your information, America the Pimp got everybody on the whole stroll, even you selling different things. A good citizen is judged by how much money they have and the status and respect their money brings. Bodies for sale, disguises, skills, power, merchandise. Anything worth having has got to have a price. Money is something that everybody who lives in America needs, regardless of sex, color, age, or creed. You don't get something for nothing in this world. Everything that keeps you alive is real. So if you're eating, you got a roof over your head, then somebody has got to be paying the bill. Sisters and brothers, friends and enemies, I'm talking about money. That thing that keeps the so-called crooks and robbers hustling on the street. That thing that keeps the policemen faithfully walking the beat. That thing that keeps the crooked politicians safely in their seats. Money has the power to change the way you feel. It can make you feel good, baby, or it can make you very ill. Without money, the teachers won't teach you what they know. Without money, you can't even be a wino. Without money, the sick can't get well. Without money, you can't even pay your bill. Without money, the hungry can't be fed. Without money, the undertakers won't even bury the dead. The root of all evil, the preachers say. So they save us from this evil. They walk away with a pocket full on collection day. Now that ain't funny, because in America, even God needs money. It takes money to spread love and hate. It takes money to party and celebrate. Romance without finance is nonsense. The cost of living keeps going up. Union lines and picket signs. Everybody needs money to stay alive. It sure is funky. People got to turn tricks for America the pimp just to survive.
Before getting into the topic, and that was the real Uncle Sam at the end. Yeah, so this topic is a choice between two cultures, and don't just think it's just the culture of the phase of capitalism right now where they're taking everything and neoliberalism, but behind this is a philosophy of materialism, and it is this that is infecting a part of our community. And some parts of it are taking hold of this, not conscious of what they're taking hold of. And some are conscious. A choice between two cultures, as I pointed out before, as God revealed to me, and this was in the 80s. And so this is prophetic. What God was saying is the primary cause for problems in the community is that the forces that have hit the community, hit the family, hit the African world, hit white people, which these are things that came to me later. The effect of these forces, and in this case, it's the force of neoliberalism, where everything is being privatized, the rich are taking everything and leaving hardly even crumbs for everybody else, that the unintended consequences of this, because the people who did this, with the exception of dropping drugs in the Black community, did not know what the cultural consequences would be, didn't think about it, right? And so when we're talking about what's the solution to a problem, when God gives it to you, God gives you the problem and the solution. So if the problem is we're being hit by alien forces that are materialistic at their core and that are driving people deeper and deeper into poverty and despair, then the answer is whatever you do, you're going to have to draw from the best of your culture. This is what you call concentric thought, or God's mind gives you the whole of a part. And so in this question that I was asking, that a student asked me that I couldn't answer, why are we having such breakdowns in culture in the Black community? God gives me the problem and the solution, because these forces have produced a choice between two cultures, often involuntary, often unconscious, but sometimes quite voluntary. And over time, because I got this answer in the 80s through the light, it's starting to play out in other communities. And in other cases, I'm being able to see more because God's mind is whole and total. We never get all of what God's got. But when God gives us an answer to a problem, it gives you the whole of a part. And so since spirit is at the foundation of our culture, I think it's fitting that I would be using a tool that's coming from the highest source of spirit, as Black people would say, God. Not just God, God. And a lot of people are suspicious of this. I had some visit with God. Really? Yeah, well, the proof of the pie is in the pudding, is in the tasting. So this choice between two cultures, that has manifested through these hits that our community has faced, our families have faced, our people have faced, have put us into a position not seen before. In slavery, we didn't have a choice between two cultures. We reformulated our culture in this country. In the Caribbean, we continued a culture because we were 98% on any island. But because the culture's inside of you, there is no way you could avoid it. And so this has been what inspired us. And so when we look at the challenge we have now, and I'm going to go into two areas in which the choice between two cultures has manifested itself in Black communities. One is through leadership, and two, the Black church, which you would say is leadership too, but it's a different component. But before going into that, I want to show you how our ancestors faced problems even harder than the ones we're facing right now. And it wasn't a choice between two cultures, because the majority of them were firm in what their cultural position is. And the majority of our people are now as well. But we've got defections from our culture caused by, in this case, the neoliberal forces that have hit our community like we've never seen before. So on one of my shows, and this is one of the reasons why I enjoy doing this, one of the brothers watching the show recommended that I read a book called Fire of Freedom. And it's about an former enslaved African who escaped to his freedom named Abraham Galloway. And this book is entitled fully, The Fire of Freedom, Abraham Galloway and the Slave Civil War. I made this point a couple of weeks ago when I was talking about alliances and power and coalitions and power. And I made the point that Abraham Lincoln had to come to us to save his white behind when he was losing the Civil War. Emancipation was issued through executive order because without us, they couldn't win the war. And with the continuation of slavery, the white aristocracy in Britain would side with the South, and that would pretty well split the country in half. America couldn't fight the South and Britain, the strongest power in the world at that time. So when he issues the Emancipation Proclamation, he's expecting Blacks to flood to the Union Army and join the Union Army. But there are places in which Blacks are refusing to join. And so Abraham Lincoln sends a person named Kinsley with a signed letter coming from him. Kinsley is also an emissary of the governor of Massachusetts, John Albion Andrew, who was an abolitionist leader. And so he is looking to find recruits for the federal army, but they aren't to be found. And he's in North Carolina, and nothing's happening. And so one night, he's invited by a sister, Marianne Starkey, an African woman, to a meeting. And in this meeting, at midnight, where he's blindfolded in the attic of a room, a bunch of rugged former enslaved Africans come in. These are leaders. These are leaders of African people. And they are there to negotiate with Lincoln's representative. And they're not playing. And I'm using this as an example because this is an example of how real leadership works in the Black community. When it works this way. And so into the room comes a rugged ex-slave. His name was Isaac Felton. And he comes through the kitchen door. He was called Uncle Isaac. And then a younger Black man named John Randolph Jr. came in. And he had been enslaved before the war and had escaped. And then later, under a dim light and a candle, the leader of the group, Abraham Galloway, one of the baddest leaders that you haven't heard about, period, whether you heard about him or not, comes into the room. Now, Galloway was tall. He was a proud Black man. He was armed. In fact, most of these men in this meeting, they were armed. They ain't all just thinking that, well, we can join the Union Army. Oh, Uncle Abe has freed us. They're too smart for that. And so coming in with their revolvers and everything else, with only a Bible on the table, Galloway, who was tall, dark complexion, fierce. He was a man of great pride. And he had escaped from enslavement and gone to Canada. And then later, he had gone to Haiti to consult with the president of Haiti on whether or not they would support an armed uprising of enslaved Africans. This was prior to the Civil War. Huh? He was no joke. He was the leader of leaders, because this was a group of leaders meeting here. And so they began to talk. And so Galloway and the other brothers and the sister who was there, they make it clear. With a gun pointed to Lincoln's representative's head, they want to be clear that the only way they're going to fight is, one, that the Union is standing for the freedom of enslaved Africans, A. B, that the Union is going to pay soldiers the same pay they pay white soldiers. C, they wanted a guarantee that if they're captured in war, see, these are fighters, they've been fighting all their life. This is not your typical portrayal of enslaved Africans, humble, meek, and all this stuff. And so what they want guaranteed is, if they're captured as prisoners of war, they want Lincoln to insist that the Confederates not kill them, which is something they did. And then they wanted guarantees for their women. They wanted jobs for their women. They wanted care for their women. They wanted some place for their women to stay. And they spent all night negotiating with this representative of Lincoln at gunpoint, scared him to death. This man also said when he looked at Galloway, he knew he was serious, and he knew the rest of them were as well. And so by the end of this meeting, Galloway and the other leaders tell him that if they're satisfied, they'll be able to recruit a regiment of Black soldiers. And while suspicious, they were sufficiently satisfied. Within 2 days, 5,000 Black people marched across the river, men, women, and children, but 5,000 of them sign up for the Union Army. Now, I cite this because in a choice between two cultures, one of the things that's most important when it comes to leadership is that leadership has to be grounded in African and African American culture. I had not heard of Galloway, and I want to thank the brother who had recommended me to read this book, and I ordered it right away. I'm halfway through it right now. I want to thank you for it. But I know Galloway. I didn't know him personally, but I know the cloth from which he was spun. It was the same cloth that created a man named Adams, who was a leader in the post-Reconstruction period in the South, and produced Pop Singleton, who was a revolutionary spiritual leader. And these Africans who came to join the Union Army and their wives to be taken care of, these Africans, I know what had happened because I know their leadership culture. They had met before with the people. They were mouthpieces for the people. They weren't leaders in the hierarchical way of the European where someone's on top and telling everybody else what to do. They were mouthpieces of the people's will. And they had hammered out what they wanted. And of course, in the case of Galloway, he was a part of the Loyal League and other secret societies, and they had really saw way ahead what would happen way before the Civil War and saw that they would have to push the president of the United States, but this was before Lincoln, to take a stand on anti-slavery. They made it clear they're not interested in fighting for keeping the Union together. They're interested in freedom. They were guided by a central principle and many other principles of African culture. And so in the case of Henry Adams, after the Civil War, he had been a Civil War veteran, moved throughout the South, and would help to teach Blacks how to read and write, and then ask them what they wanted, and then create organizations with them to carry that out. Pop Singleton would take large numbers of Blacks to Kansas to get them out of the South. But it was this idea that leaders are mouthpieces of the people. That goes back to African leadership traditions. And they were dedicated to serving their people. And this brother here, and those with him, and the sisters with him, they were equally dedicated. So now we are faced with a choice between two cultures, because in the reorganization of this society along the lines of neoliberalism, then what has happened is neoliberal philosophy has infected a sector of our people. It is a philosophy, it is a thought pattern, it is a communication pattern, and it is a behavior pattern. And that thought pattern is purely materialistic. And so it's taking those who advocate it and some who are joining groups, whether it's community organizations or churches or other organizations that advocate this. Some of them don't even know what they're joining, because a lot of Blacks in the Black community have not heard of neoliberalism. I have senior community organizers that had never heard of this before. You understand? And yet it's seeped up into the church pews. It's seeped up into community organizations. It's seeped up into nonprofit organizations in the Black community. And it's got people, some aware and many not, being put in a position where their spiritual values, their commitment to spirit, to humanism, is being eroded by a love and commitment to the dollar. Now, there was a book written quite some time ago called Black Awakening in Capitalist America, written by a scholar, a Black scholar named Robert Allen. Robert Allen to find a move made by the Ford Foundation in the mid-60s to try and shift the political culture of Blacks away from the volunteer, committed community organization that placed the interests of the people first and cared nothing about lining their pocketbooks with dead presidents. And so he shows that a man named McGeorge Bundy, who had been National Security Council advisor to John Fitzgerald Kennedy, after leaving that position, he became head of the Ford Foundation. The Ford Foundation in philanthropy plays a major role in cooling out Black radicalism or Black activism. And so he addresses the Urban League Conference in the mid-60s and says that they wanted to create a new class of Black leadership that could negotiate Blacks to another phase of struggle, meaning a group that would no longer be mouthpieces of the people, but would express the will of whites, of the white elite. And so their first campaign was to get Carl Stokes elected mayor in Cleveland. But that was a common objective of a number of Black freedom organizations who were not committed to the Ford Foundation strategy. They wanted to see Black mayors too. But the Ford Foundation was particularly interested in seeing that Blacks who occupied these positions would be Blacks who did not have a militant background. These would be Blacks who had basically worked their way up through Black communities, through nonprofit organizations. And through nonprofit organizations, they could begin to form alliances, private, public alliances with corporate leaders. And over time, those within that group that proved to be, those that could be shaped and who are doing what Samuel Jackson said, be cool, be humble. Over time, they could be cleared to run for political office. Now, I'm not suggesting that whites had complete control over this because Blacks were out to control cities. But this was the aim of the white power elite. And so the key thing that determined, and see, this is what causes a shift in culture between some Black leaders now, as opposed to those who are into supporting and speaking to and organizing for the interests of Black people. And so a key demarcation point was for these new leaders is that they had to support the economic developmental agenda for downtown expansion. They had to buy into the economic interests of what had been defined as the enemy of Black people, who the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King saw as the source of the deep problems of poverty and oppression that affected Black communities, and King called a system of capitalism more crooked than a pretzel. The key for them getting over was that they would support the developmental projects of the rich corporations, the real estate developers, and big businessmen, some of whom were coming from the outside. That meant that they would not address the issues of rundown housing, of the need for well-funded public schools, the need for good paying jobs that would do more than just help people make ends meet. So this is a part of an absorption process that begins in the 50s and the 60s. And with neoliberalism, this has gotten worse. So what you have is the emergence of a new leadership class. And in the case of urban renewal, which we called in the 60s Negro removal, you'd now call it Black removal. This group of leadership, often in the Rust Belt, coming from community organizations and nonprofits, and in areas like where I organized in the Bay Area, what ends up happening is certain Black organizations and leaders begin to sign on to urban renewal, which is Black removal, which means tearing down Black communities. Now, in some areas, like Atlanta, the Black elite was strong enough in their position that they were able to prevent the total destruction of neighborhoods. But in other communities, total neighborhoods are wiped out. In the first neighborhood, they're going to run a freeway through or simply tear it down and say that this is unlivable housing, when in fact they're mansions. In the Fillmore, Victorian mansions. The first community they're going to tear down is the Black community. My father was a doorman at a Chinese nightclub, Forbidden City, and he was also a longshoreman. And in his role as a doorman, he was a bouncer. He heard two people that served on the housing authority say, "We're going to tear the Fillmore down after those mortgages are paid off." And he's talking about the Fillmore, the Black community. And so you had some Blacks in leadership that participated in this. And the way redevelopment was made possible is the federal government made it possible through federal legislation, for big business to come in from out of town or in that same city and buy up real estate for them at a reasonable price, but the government would subsidize a bigger price so that the owners of real estate, they would make a profit while the developers made a profit. Once those two formulas were put together, then redevelopment moved as a sledgehammer. And this is operating in the context of neoliberalism, where the government is beginning to take things out of the community and putting it into private pockets. And so these leaders, some of whom were coming out of nonprofit organizations, and here's the deal about nonprofit organizations. In the 60s, you didn't have nonprofit organizations leading anything because they're being financed by corporations. And while they may do good things, it's usually limited to one objective. And you're not going to be able to change anything when someone else is giving you the money and your objective is narrow. But when you have a community organization, it's multifaceted. It can engage in all kinds of struggle and no one owns it. And as a result, can produce change because it can get the support of the broader Black community, depending on the issue and how well they organize. So this is a part of the process of absorbing emerging Black leadership into the position of serving the corporate elite. And so what ends up happening is these Black elites form alliances with banking interests, real estate interests, those that deal with the money. Now, groups like us who were fighting, we were beating the corporations. Now, they're eating out of the hands of the corporations and willing to do their bidding. And so as big business expands into urban places, these Black elites are supporting, destroying Black communities. I saw it work in the Fillmore, where Black churches, not all of them, but some of them, align with developers, and some other Black politicians align with developers. And what did they get? Sometimes the position of managing a new housing unit, which had tore down a lot of Black housing and put something that wasn't worth 2 cents in its place, not owned by Blacks. Now, in some cases, Blacks built their own housing, and that housing was good. But for the most part, major developers did. And so what they usually got in exchange was high status public appointments, sometimes to city council, sometimes to other positions in the city. And these would be approved by the elite as future leaders, future mayors, and whatnot. And a part of this process, and this is under neoliberalism, it's purely a financial transaction. And so what you have arising in the Black community, and some of our scholars have done some studies on this, talking about how this works. One is a brother named Lester Spence, who's a Ivy League professor, someone who comes out of the hood. And he's talking about how basically under neoliberalism, when families no longer have welfare or any kind of support systems, what's happening with neoliberalism is it's encouraging community hustling. See, we started this with America the Pimp. Well, it's pimping. And so the money is not going to community organizations that are doing anything positive. It's going to people who can hustle up something, write a grant, and then play a hustling game, but not do anything for the benefit of the Black community. And so this kind of approach infects those who are doing it because their loyalty is to the almighty dollar. So to counter this, you need a commitment to community organizing. You need organizations that are dealing with short-term objectives that address the community's needs by organizing in the community, and long-term objectives like what King talked about, which is the restructuring of society. And this is what you call radical organizing. And so we've had groups like this, Black Lives Matter, on a national level, and then local communities. In every community, you have groups like this. And so it's the culture of serving the community as opposed to the culture of serving money. Now, the thing is, when it comes to the political arena, where you have Blacks in political office as mayors and stuff like that, we end up with a different philosophy for Blacks who are coming out of the neoliberal agenda. Those who come out of African-American organizing and leadership traditions, they come as representatives of Black folks. They are organizing usually to fight the system for better housing, for jobs, for better schools. They come as representatives of us. But those who come out of this corporatized neoliberal agenda, they are coming as agents representing someone else. Someone else. And it's not us. Corporate interests. So in the case of mayors, we've had some mayors who stood for the people. Harold Washington in Chicago. Ron Dellums, when he ran for mayor, though it wasn't a good time for him because he was really no longer had the energy for the job, but he certainly had the commitment. Or in Congress, an Adam Clayton Powell. It's a host of, we've had mayors that have represented the interests of Black folks, but those that pursue the neoliberal agenda, and those are the ones that can usually rise above a mayorship into an office where normally Blacks don't get elected. That is, offices where whites are going to vote for them. So we see that in the post-voting rights era, the post-civil rights era, we see neoliberal mayors like Cory Booker of New York, of Newark, Stephanie Rawlings Blake of Baltimore, Harold Ford of Tennessee, Cassim Reed of Atlanta, Dennis Archer of Detroit, Kurt Summers of Chicago. So these are people who come in pursuing the agenda outside, not ours. And so in a choice between two cultures, when it comes to reorganizing and revitalizing Black families and communities, we have to be training organizers or supporting organizations that are already doing it in African and African American leadership philosophy and African American leadership systems that make them willing to fight for the people. And that's something that you can't force on anybody. People do it because of their love for the people. Now, when it comes to the Black church, neoliberalism is in competition with, because the neoliberal Black church is a church committed to money, whereas many of us have written off the Black church as being solely dedicated to that. But in fact, the philosophy of the Black church comes out of a number of traditions. And one of them is the Black liberation tradition. Another is more recently the Afrocentric tradition, but the oldest is the prophetic tradition. The prophetic tradition that is grounded in the founders of the Black church that came out of divination systems, because that church wasn't formed until after enslavement. And so the prophetic tradition is one where often the leader has a vision, sometimes coming from God, but if not, is committed to supporting the liberation of Black folks and is stressing the need to have a moral order. And this has been the key to the Black church. But as neoliberalism has sunk in, then we find ourselves in a position where there is a commitment to money over materialism. And the economic philosophy of the church is the philosophy that the church is a market, and its members are those that we recruit as we would go and buy a product. In this case, sell a product, which is the philosophy of the church, which is to get rich quick. And so it's a materialistic philosophy. So it's no longer worshiping God, it's worshiping money. You hear me? And some of these are the mega churches that you see. Not all mega churches are neoliberal, because some of them are committed to Black liberation. In the Bay Area, Allen Temple Church, a large church that's built housing for the community, has a family life center, does all kinds of things. And in each community, you will see a lot of churches that are committed to that, or some, it just may be the Spirit of God, but they're not into God as a dollar bill. Of course, most preachers get tagged with that, but not everyone is. Greater Amani Church in Memphis, Tennessee, Reverend Bill Atkins ran his church and didn't take a salary, you know, and at one time had 10,000 members. Right now, it's a church of 5,000 members with programs all over the world, especially in Africa. He's been initiated into kingship in Ghana. And this is a brother who's a historian and a businessman. So all mega churches are not, you know, just into money. Some of them are into liberation. But when we see the neoliberal church, they're engaged in pimpology, same as some of these Negro leaders. And so their attitude towards the Black poor is, and this is generally the neoliberal philosophy across the board, is they're responsible for their condition. I was listening to 50 Cent, who's got some interesting qualities. He was explaining why you have homeless Black people. He said, well, a lot of people just set up their tent in the Black community, and that's just the way they want it to be. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? Give me a break. These are homeless people who are in the street because either they don't have a job or they got a job and the job ain't paying enough to pay the rent. And we see homeless people across the country. And they're saying hundreds of thousands, it's in the millions. And these redevelopment agents, these people who are into real estate and everything else, have set it up so that when new housing is built, it's high-income condos for the rich whites. And so Blacks are priced out of housing. And it's true for the poor as well. And under neoliberalism, they've taken themselves out of that business. And so you have neoliberal Black churches where individualism is being promoted, materialism is being promoted, and people are worshiping in luxury. These church centers are like theaters. You can call it opulent worship. These Negroes see themselves in Negro heaven, that somehow they're going to get rich. And for them, that's the goal in life. And so you can have a mega church surrounded by poor Black people, which is almost always the case. And is this church doing anything for the people? No. And so this blame the poor, focus on simply what you can get for yourself, becomes the ideology. And so what happens is, by blaming the poor, then the church subverts its ideology and they become agents of oppression because their interests are in line with the corporate interests that are bleeding the community. Some Blacks are in this because, well, you know, they want to be prosperous. They don't know anything about neoliberalism. They just see, well, these are people doing well, and the preacher can preach, and they got a good choir and all the rest of this stuff. But sooner or later, they've got to see that this is a church that is doing nothing for the community. It is only helping itself, and usually only helping the preacher. This kind of theology is a violent theology. It's a theology against the people. And it's a theology that cooperates in keeping the people down while saying that they're just too lazy or they won't get a good education. They won't pick themselves up by the bootstrap the way they did, as if there's any bootstrap for the poor to have. So these are choices between two cultures. So when you're looking at what's happening in Washington, D.C., it's already happening in your community. And a lot of our organizers don't have a label for it. They don't know it's neoliberalism. They don't know why some of these churches won't come around and give support to various struggles that are being carried out by other churches and by other organizations. And so this is a part of how this has worked from the bottom up. And so in organizing Black communities, we're going to have to root this out, and it's not going to be easy. It's not enough to be up here praying and putting money in the collection pot. You got to be doing something in the community. Some churches are, and many are not, but those that are neoliberal, they're in a special category. So when we're looking at the Black church, it's a choice between the prophetic liberation, Afrocentric ministry and this neoliberal, materialistic, individualistic, go for yourself ministry. So in conclusion, if we're going to rebuild Black communities, and we have to, then what we're going to have to do is draw from the depths of our culture and draw from the best of our culture, combining that with organizing, combining that with rebuilding families and extended family communities, combining that with the youth and the elders working together, combining that with study that is combined with the work that we do. So as one person here, Whitaker, Shakur Whitaker, to me, a report card for any shepherd is the condition of the flock. Yeah, combining that with the concept of leadership, where leaders are servants and shepherds of the people, not just shepherds, because the people have to have the major say-so. And what we're faced with in Washington right now is going to be resolved in the streets. And that is in the communities in which we live. And so we've got to root out the corruption, root out those negative cultural choices. And sometimes it's very complex, because sometimes we'll have a person, because we talk about a choice between two cultures, let's take this to the personal level. You may have a person who has some good family values, who was raised well, who loves their mama, good family person, male or female, but at the same time are attracted to this glitter of materialism and will look out for their mama, but at the same time sign up for Trump. Or if they don't sign up for Trump, go on an individualistic path when it comes to the broader Black community, you know? So this choice between two cultures isn't just between an organizing style of leadership or a church philosophy or the way in which we build love in our families. It's also internal. And one of the things of neoliberalism is to turn most people in this country, and that includes Black people, into consumers, so that all you're interested in is shopping. All you're interested in is accumulating some things that look good, but not anything that's going to, lead to the prosperity of our people. So it's spiritism versus materialism. It's love of people versus love of things. And it's all right to have things, but you should never love a material thing. You should only love what loves you back. You know what I'm talking about? Huh? I got a nice house. I don't love my house. I told you, I like driving a Corvette. I don't love my Corvette. In fact, to tell you a little story, this was 1990, and I'd gone through all these crises and stuff, and had come through them, starting to write The Mother Principle. My wife and I, my first wife, we had gone to Africa and came back. And I had bought this 300ZX. You know, I like sports cars. Only new car I ever bought. It was black. And we're taking care of my sister's daughter, my niece. And my wife hid the keys. Well, my wife's a Scorpio. My sister's daughter is a Scorpio. So she's good at uncovering hidden things. She got the key and drove the car, but she didn't know how to drive it well. And so she had to park it somewhere and scratched it to make it look like it was stolen. Now, if you scratch black, you got to replace all the paint. So here I am with this car that I really liked, but I didn't love. And so she found it amazing that while I didn't like what she did, I wasn't going after the way she thought I would. Why? Because people before material things. And then I have a way of compensating. If anything goes wrong, I find a positive to replace it. So I didn't like black as much as I like gold. So I had the car painted in gold. That made me happy. But the point is, we need material things. We are oppressed. Poverty is misery. I'm not arguing for no poverty. But I am arguing against materialism because it will mess you up. It's a disease. It's like a negative force. I felt it once. I felt that material thing once. And I said, oh, no. You know what I mean? I felt it once because I'm not into greed. But in one case, I did. And I had to walk away. I said, uh-oh, stop this. You know what I mean? So this system is very good at taking almost everything you've got and then turns around and gives you a mirage that you too can be wealthy, that you too can be rich and all the rest of this. And if you do get rich, fine, good for you. Do something for your people. But for most of us, that's not going to happen because we're living under structural semi-colonialism, where the system is structured to underdevelop us, to keep us poor, to keep us in a category where we're on the economic bottom. And so we need to rebuild businesses and stuff in the Black community, but not neoliberal ones, not ones where the whole commitment is just to money, but to cooperative businesses, to businesses that will uplift our people. And if it's individually owned, then, you know, support those businesses, but also encourage them to do something in the Black community. So it's a choice between a beautiful culture or a mad one, a humane culture or one that has no humanity in it, a culture of kindness or a culture of meanness, a culture of evilness, and those occupying the White House, especially the head, as De Niro said, he had a little email out. Robert De Niro, great actor, and liberal, and he was talking about Trump is evil. He said he's not a gangster. He said gangsters have a code of ethics. He knows he's Italian. Not that all gangsters are Italian, but if you see the films he's done, a lot of them are on Italian life, you know. He's saying even the mobsters have a code of ethics. So I think that code is eroded a lot. He ain't got no code of ethics, you know? And so Trumpism reflects the epitome of Aryan culture, which is cruel, vindictive, cares nothing about anything but itself. That's Aryan culture. So this choice between two cultures, because it comes from God's whole mind, which reveals to us a part which is a whole. And this is the best way to get it. It's the real cure for what we're going through. Right cultural choices combined with programs that meet your immediate needs. And that means you've got to immerse yourself in this culture. That means you've got to transform yourself. If you're into the feelings of depression, feelings that you just don't have any reason to live, you know, then you got to go inside yourself. You can get healing help with psychiatric help. That's good. And go inside yourself and cultivate yourself and deal with what's bothering you. Deal with what gives you the greatest joy in life. When you're pursuing your mission in life, you're happy. And you should be healthy if you do the other things to promote good health. In fact, fighting for liberation when you're facing oppression is the greatest healer of all. I know, 65 years. It's been good for me. You got to take care of your health in other ways. It's just not automatic. But that's key. And so we can have holistic healing as opposed to surface healing. If someone's an alcoholic and getting off of alcohol, then it's facing why. You got on it in the first place. Because those alcoholics who are what they call dry alcoholics, they don't drink anymore. But they have the same problems plaguing them that drove them to alcoholism. There are some who get off of alcohol and never face, or drugs, face why they were on it, but they get off. That's better than being on it, but that's not a real healing. And in the end, the real healing draws from your deep sense of love of self. So in an age of crisis, this is an age of a great opportunity for us to go digging deep down inside of ourselves. So I hope you got something out of this. A choice between two cultures, the underlying cause behind the state of Black and MAGA communities today. Hotep. Wolf Manley said immersion is key. No one wants to immerse in water they know nothing about. Yeah, that's a part of discovering yourself, and self-knowledge is key. But it's a beautiful process. It's like pulling weeds out of the garden, you know? That's how you keep a garden growing. That's how you have to do yourself. I haven't gone to psychiatrists, but I don't knock it. I've done my own self-cultivation work, but knowing myself has been real key to that. As an African and as a person with a special destiny, as we all have, knowing my mission in life and pursuing it, that's where the greatest love and joy is. Thanks, Robert. DB, was Reverend Ike strictly pimping? Well, I know he was one of the first ones to preach prosperity gospel. So he was talking about how important it is to have money. So I haven't studied him well enough to do an evaluation. You might want to do that. Wolf Manley, Not one of the Abrahamic murder cults have lifted us to free ourselves from the Caucasian thought which ensnares us. Yeah, but when you have blacks, see, I'm not a Christian, so I'm not trying to defend something that I'm committed to. But when they're coming out of one of those streams that are good, the prophetic ministry, the Afrocentric ministry, Jeremiah Wright, pretty good. They're addressing community needs, but they're also addressing their own. So my position on religion is that's people's choice. And usually that's determined by where you're born. If you were born in the desert of Saudi Arabia, you'd probably be a Muslim. Or if you're born in India, you'd probably be Hindu. So a lot of that has got to do with circumstance. But it's a question of what you do with what you got. So I'm not here to put down anybody's religion. And I know, and I've had plenty of students who, coming through my classes, Afrocentric, they make it clear, I'm an Afrocentric Christian. Good. And if you aren't, if it's working for you, good. Shakira Abdul Ali, in my community, I'm hearing it is congregation members, not just the leaders, who don't want to engage the boys on the block that are selling the drugs and shooting up each other with illegal guns. It's a white pastor who is rolling through the worst hoods ministering to these boys. Our boys, it's painful to watch. Now that's another story, because dealing with violence where you're putting your own life in line, that ain't easy. So yeah, that's one that needs to be done, but it takes a whole lot of organizing. There's whole ways to deal with this. It's not easy, but I get what you're saying, but that does not make them neoliberalists. Wolf Manlu, any organization is saying that they are for Black, if it has no knowledge of Ma'at, then it will not really serve us. Yes, and they may not know Ma'at. They may not be Afrocentric. But if they are righteous, if they're into truth, if they're into morality, if they're into justice, it's the same thing. Wolf Manlu, hell, no jobs are paying enough to live comfortably now, because jobs means just over broke. Jobs mean that now because the cost of housing has gone up, the cost of living has gone up, and yet the buying power of the average person's dollar is where it was in the 1980s. So that's the problem. And what you need short term is you need unionization, where jobs pay a livable income, where there's medical care, and where there's retirement. And you need a guaranteed annual income so that you prop up those low incomes. And it's easy to do. The reason why it's not being done is the system wants to put it in the pockets of the rich, and then they brainwash everybody else into believing, oh, this is socialism. Well, what if it is? What's wrong with that? The rich get it. Thank you for the compliments. Wolf Man knew the Black church is easily corrupted. I wish Chicago's current mayor would see Black issues instead of the corporate power structure. Yeah. Wolf Manlu says that Harold was a beast for Black issues. Spell that out. Teresa Miller. Oh God, well, why Gaza is not on the agenda today, though I believed he talked about Trump wanting to take the Strip 2 weeks ago. Yeah, well, I'm opposed to it, and we all need to be. And the way Trump's running it now, he would like to just send them all away, and that's the agenda for the Israelis, not just the right wing. I think the people of Israel. That's their thing. So, yeah, we need to support the Palestinians in every way we can. Kurt Thomas, right on. Gregory Jones, what is the degenerative process of capitalism? I think it's been degenerative from the beginning. But if you mean its crumbling aspects, that's what you mean, then you're going through it right now. You know, a rising power has risen up in the world. That's China. And they are using a capitalist model too, but a culture of Confucianism. And instead of the rich running the economy and running the government and the party and those in charge of the government run the rich. And every now and then they shut them out of business. So that's enabled them to take a lot of people out of poverty, 1 billion. I'm not saying that capitalism is the best way to go, but there are different forms. And the one in China, the people who are leading China, those are people who went through the long march, the older ones or their fathers did. And so they have a revolutionary commitment. They've suffered too, in some cases, at the hands of other governments. Okay, let's see what's on the bottom here. Okay. Harold Washington was for new affordable housing for Blacks, economic zones in Black communities, and putting more Blacks in municipal jobs. Very good. I was there when he was running for office. I know you were, that's your community. And the national chair of the Black United Front, Conrad Worrell, had negotiated with Harold Washington an agreement where he could run a Black campaign within an independent Black campaign within his larger campaign. And when I went there, you could see it was a movement to elect Harold Washington across the board because he was a progressive congressman and had to be persuaded by petition, signed petitions, to run for mayor. The big mistake that was made, and in the National Black United Front, I was national vice chair, the National Black United Front, and I proposed that the organization work with other organizations in Chicago to build a block by block structure, which Chicago's organized around. The Irish Machine was based on that, Daly and them. Well, I'm not talking about a machine. I'm not talking about blocks where the people in charge control the people below. No, I'm talking about a block structure in which the people run the show. Lou Palmer, well, man, Lou, you probably know him, was the person that first came up with the idea of drafting Harold Washington to be mayor. And Lou Palmer got the petition circulated. After he was elected, Lou Palmer made this comment. It was after he died because Harold was packing a lot of weight and had a big heart attack and went out. He said, our big mistake was that while Harold Washington was in, we didn't organize a base under him. When I was trying to push the chair and members of the National Black United Front to do what I'd already done, the only movement in the country that ever did it, block by block. The national chair said, well, yeah, you all did it from top down because we got poverty money. We'd have to do it from bottom up. I said, yeah, so we got the consciousness and it'll take time, but we can pull together the organizations. A block structure is designed so that you're not dependent on a single person running anything. It's also designed to prevent attacks, murderous attacks against your leadership from succeeding, because you can bury them in your block structure. I studied this in Cuba, CDRs, Committees for the Defense of the Revolution, a block structure. I studied this when I was working in the Ujamaa villages in Tanzania in 1973. I studied what they did in Vietnam. That's how they whipped the Americans. You're not going to have power until you build it where the people are. And in the city of Chicago, where even though a lot of blacks have left, I understand you've got 600,000 black people left. That's a hell of a lot of black folks, huh? And guess what? As you set up a structure like this, you will find that you're going to be able to deal with the gang problem. Oh, I'm not going to tell you how to do that. Just think, if you've got that power, what you can do. That power gives you the ability to really build businesses that have a mass base. It is the way that you can revitalize extended family communities, which have been seriously broken by the drug traffic. Got the elders afraid of the young and all the rest of this stuff, and the generation gap and all the rest of this stuff. So that's where power is. You understand? That's where power is. And you don't do like the Cubans did, use this just as a spy system, keeping track of people on your neighborhood and everything. Nah, It's not for the top leadership to control. It should be controlled from the bottom up. The bottom up, you know? Let the Proud Boys come and deal with that. And even without that, let them try, you know? So yeah, it's good to see what you were saying about Harold Washington. DB, any comments on Barbara Lee running for mayor in Oakland? She should, and if she does, we'll back her and she should get elected. But she will have to go up against the corporate elite. And the corporate elite likes Oreo cookies. Barbara Lee's one beautiful sister, Ron Dellums, is the one that trained her. And I'm the movement that I led politicized Ron Dellums for the first time. He was a radical congressman who was an anti-war advocate coming out of Berkeley. And he came in when I took over the War on Poverty program, while I was taking it over. He said he wanted to keep us honest. Well, we had been engaged in battles for 6 years. Where were you? But I respected him. The brother had integrity. And when he was put in charge of the Armed Services Committee, he came to me and told me, he says, man, I'm in charge of this military budget. Both of us ex-Marines, you know, him and the regulars, me and the reserves. But he had become an anti-war advocate, you know. So he picked Barbara Lee. He knew what he was doing. By the way, they were both social workers. That's one of the best professions for doing anything for the people. You sure ain't making money as a social worker. You have to have the care of the people in your heart, and she's one. Good sister. So I hope she does run, and we'll support her. Yeah, Wolf Manley was making that point. If there's anything else here? Yeah, Lou Palmer was a good man, you know. I was involved to the extent that I was in town and took part in that, but I wasn't involved in a day-to-day campaign because I wasn't in Chicago long enough but we have a national headquarters of the National Black United Front was then in Chicago. And, we had an organizational presence. So we could have done more with that. Wolf Manley was saying, we need right leadership, a council of elders to speak truth to power. That council of elders should be the council that speaks truth to organizers. The organizers should speak truth to power. Those are going to usually be younger people. Yeah. See if there's anything else here. Crates FJR, brother saying, or sister, that they're ready to fight. Right on. Got to find the right way to fight, and I think we have some ideas are percolating. The name of the book, where is that? Yeah, Imhotep. The name of the book is The Fire of Freedom, Abraham Galloway and the Slaves' Civil War. That's a picture of him there. That's him. If you look. Abraham, The Fire of Freedom, Abraham Galloway and the Slaves' Civil War. So a lot of stuff in here I didn't know, I didn't know. For example, this book is showing that the Haitians were great supporters of John Brown's uprising. And John Brown's son, who survived, the uprising, went to Haiti along with Galloway and others. And they were all pushing for the Haitian government to support a slave rebellion in the United States. Now, that's a hard thing to ask them to do because they'd bring the full weight of the U.S. government on them. But the fact that they were doing that, Is there anything else? Okay. Hope you got something out of this. I really did enjoy Brother Lamar and his show. That was bad. As in good. Shows that the hip hoppers are out there doing something. Huh? Okay, till next week. Hotep.